Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, our quick update session. Maybe wait 1 minute because so many people are joining right now. Or maybe I just start very slowly with the intro. Yeah, welcome to our quick briefing session. It got quite exciting towards the end of last year, just like the year before. The EU decided to amend the EU deforestation regulation at the last minute, really. I think the updated law was published on the 19th, I think, of December. But now, yeah, EUDR has been changed, and we want to take these 30 minutes or so. We try really to be quick to walk you through what has changed. So that's me and my colleague Chris Bell. Hi, Chris. Yeah.
Hey, Andreas, sorry.
No, good. So our goal is to make efficient use of the time, tell you the changes so you can adjust your EUDR project accordingly. Hopefully we will still have some time for your questions in the end. So I don't know if I mirrored, but on the right-hand side of your screen, there's this little Q&A symbol that you can use to ask questions. You can also just post them in the chat. What else? So the session will be recorded or is being recorded, and we will share the recording with you afterwards. And you're, of course, welcome to share it with your colleagues if they're interested and also involved with EUDR. And I will also send you the slides after the session. So, yeah. So let's get started. Before we dive into the regulatory changes, just a few words about who you're talking to. So Chris and I work for LiveEO. LiveEO is a company that originally comes from satellite analytics for analyzing risks posed to critical infrastructure by vegetation, like trees. Or some customers you would know is, for example, Deutsche Bahn, the German railway operator, is one of our longest customers. And then we have customers around the globe. We have offices in Germany, the UK, US, Australia, and Latvia, but are headquartered in Berlin, Germany. For a couple of years, we've been focusing on EUDR, since deforestation and trees, that's a good fit, and we're good at analyzing trees accurately. So we've moved into the EUDR compliance space and built a compliance software that solves EUDR end-to-end, which is called TradeAware, and we will also get very quickly into that later. Some of the companies, some of which you surely know, that already use TradeAware for EUDR compliance are on this slide. So these are typically companies that have complex supply chains and who want to get compliance right with minimal legal exposure and also minimal stress on their supply chains, and who have a desire for automating the compliance process as much as possible. But now let's get to the actual matter of this session, and we start with one of the biggest changes, I guess, for most companies is the new timelines, dates and timelines, when you have to be compliant, basically. So if you've been sleeping for the past few months, I have good news for you. You're not late, because the application date for medium and large enterprises has been moved from 30th of December 25, so a few weeks ago, for 1 year, to the 30th of December 2026. For micro and small enterprises, there's an additional 6 months to become compliance. In this case, that's also a 1 year postponement, basically, of the application date. However, there are a little bit of fine print here. So this deadline is, or this extension is not applicable if the products are already covered by EUTR, by the EU timber regulation, not for downstream operators and traders, to that, but because of reduced obligations, downstream operators and traders now also have the earlier deadline. And this is only for companies, only for small companies established before 30th of December 2024. As you know, the EUDR, or as you might know, is replacing the EUTR. The final date where EUDR can be applied was also moved. I think it was also one year earlier previously, to the end of 2029. However, just a side note again, this is only for wood products harvested before the 29th of June 2023, but placed on the EU market after the EUDR application date. So for everything harvested after this date, EUDR would apply already. Then, so this is basically all you need to know about the timeline changes, I would say. Let's move on then to the next topic, which is, yeah, so this, I won't really go through it, just put this in the slides, so you'll have it later, the basically the thresholds for what counts as a small company under EUDR. This is basically drawn from a different directive, but these are the current values. The scope, so basically the question here is which companies fall under EUDR, has been changed slightly. It's been largely unchanged. You find a list of the affected products following this link here, which, yeah, when I send you the slide, you'll have it. Basically, everything stayed the same. The only change here was that chapter 49, so that's printed books, newspapers, and so on, are removed from scope. But important to note, pulp and paper, so let's like unprinted, let's say, are still in scope. So it's only the print products that have been removed. All right, then we can already go on to the obligations. And here, this is outdated. I hope this is clearly visible that this is the old rules. So this is more like a reminder, basically, how it used to be before. You have the left-hand side here is outside of the EU. And then here, this basically is the value chain within the EU. So you have producers outside of Europe who need to share the information, the geo information of where the plots, where the product, the commodity they produced was harvested along the supply chain. When it comes into Europe, the first actor on the market, called the operator, who basically places the imported product on the market, has to perform due diligence. That means check the supply chains basically for different rules, and check for if there was no deforestation cost in the cost of production, and submit a due diligence statement to the EU system, the EUDR information system, which is called Traces, receive the reference number. When they sell their product, which is also under EUDR, they share the data with the next actor, which then has to validate this number, submit a new DDS, and receive the new reference number, which again they share. So that means the important part here and what changed is the obligations mostly for the later actors in the supply chain. And we will basically get to the changes now. Before we do that, before we get into the obligations, which are tied to roles in the supply chain, I want to quickly refresh and also, or maybe update you on which roles there are now under EUDR for companies within the supply chain, because two of them are new. So initially, like when EUDR first became law, there were essentially two roles. The operator, which still is the first actor to place a regulated product on the market. So that often means import, can also mean, or exports that has not yet undergone due diligence. So basically the first actor on the EU market for a new product, for a regulated product. Then initially, every actor that came afterwards was, according to the EUDR legal text, was a so-called trader, which is an actor that makes the products available. So products that have already undergone due diligence by the operator, who essentially sells those. Already last year in the guidance documents that the Commission published, There was a new role established, which now entered the law officially, which is the downstream operator. That's basically a company that, in the example that I have on the next slide, there's a company that imports wood, which is regulated under EUDR, and then makes a chair out of it, so furniture, which is also regulated under EUDR, and makes that available. So they are basically the first actor to, or the actor that transform a product that has already undergone due diligence into a new product that is also regulated. And that now became an official category or role under EUDR with clearly defined obligations. And then the second new role is micro and small primary operators. These are micro and small size companies in low risk countries that place relevant products on the market or export them after growing, harvesting, or raising them. So in most cases, this will be small agricultural or forestry enterprises within the EU. However, the rule is also it also applies to corresponding companies in other low risk countries like the US. But I won't get into that more now. So let's go into the obligations that these roles now have in the supply chain. For this, I've prepared a similar graphic to the one before. So this is basically the new obligations. And the most important change and the most significant new principle we have here is the first touch principle applies now. So while before, every actor in the supply chain, once the products had entered the EU market, had to conduct due diligence or make sure that, or in the legal language, ascertain that due diligence had been conducted properly. Now it's only the first actor, the operator, who needs to conduct due diligence and who needs to submit accordingly a due diligence statement to the EUDR information system. So how this works, basically, again, we have a producer outside of Europe who in this case produces wood. They share the plot data information that the operator needs to conduct due diligence. In this case, this is in my example, it's a manufacturer, furniture manufacturer. So they check if production was legal and no deforestation has been caused with the producer. When they place it on the market, this can mean they directly sell whatever they have imported or they use their own production. They need to submit a due diligence statement. So this is basically as it was before, and they receive a reference number from the information system back. Before the change, now the subsequent actors would have to check with this reference number, basically, if due diligence had been carried out appropriately. Now they only need to collect this, and it's only the first actor in the supply chain that needs to do this. And this applies for the first downstream actor. So whenever a product has been placed on the European market and has undergone due diligence, then it's more or less over. It only means that the next actor has to still collect the reference number if their supplier, so in this case the manufacturer, is an operator. We get into what this means also, but I just want to finish with the obligations quickly. So they don't need to, no longer do they need to submit their own due diligence statement. They only need to register once if they trade regulated products under EUDR and store the reference numbers for 5 years they receive and make them available to authorities in case of an audit. And this also applies, of course, for potentially for later actors in the supply chain. So they don't have a direct application here, but it's possible that this trader also has suppliers who are operators and might also need to register once. However, there is an obligation, which is an exception. if there is a substantiated concern that there has been deforestation caused or that production was not legal. Such concerns can be raised by any natural person, any legal person in the EU. Then also the trader has to basically investigate what has happened. And yeah, but otherwise the obligations more or less end with the manufacturer, the next actor, the next downstream actor, be it a trader or also a downstream operator, doesn't have to submit a due diligence, doesn't have to ascertain that due diligence has been carried out, and only needs to register once in the system. And this is not per product, but one time. And with this, I would hand it over to Chris. Take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Andreas. So taking this a little further in terms of some of the implications of these changes. So we see this first touch principle come in. So you really get into a place where, as Andreas was showing previously, once a product came into the EU market, it would still require due diligence statements to be produced as it moved around the market. Rather than now, what you have is effectively a sort of a first touch principle. So this idea that once it's in the market, there are significantly fewer requirements placed on it. So operators of all sizes still have full obligations. So whoever sort of is that first touch, is the first person bringing it into the market, still has those obligations. But downstream actors no longer need to ascertain if due diligence has been carried out. So this significantly simplifies the process there for anyone that would have been receiving products from those operators. But you still need to know if your supplier is an operator, because you'll need to get the due diligence statement numbers, reference numbers from them to retain those as well. So there's still, of course, a question of knowing if the person that you're dealing with is themselves an operator, and then getting the information from them that you'll need to retain still. And next slide, Andreas. And then obligations for SMEs, so for small and micro enterprises. So if you're an SME operator, you still have the full obligation of an operator. If you're a downstream operator, so this is a situation where you are placing a product first on the market, but the product has already been subject to due diligence. So that's, for example, if you receive a product that you then convert into another product. You don't need to register with Traces, the EU system, but you do need to collect and retain data for 5 years. And then for small and micro primary operators, so the first to bring it into the market, you can also submit a one-time simplified declaration. So that, again, massively simplifies this process of, rather than producing these on the basis of a shipment or producing them annually, it's a one-time declaration. And you can see there the type of information that you need to put in there. So of course, information about yourself as a company, information about the product that you're bringing in, the sort of quantity of it that you'd see. And then also a major thing that we see as a change here for the simplified declaration as well is that you no longer need specifically the geolocation for the plots of land involved. You can also use the postal address of the establishment. So see there's significantly reducing the need to go off and sort of gather that data for the actual specific geolocations. And then, yeah, if that information is already available in another member state system, then you can also access that. So key takeaways and next steps. The operator obligations have not changed. Of course, the timeline on which they come into force has, but that means, of course, companies have more time to prepare. And we just emphasize at this point that gathering that data, reaching out to your suppliers, having the types of conversations that you need to have is time consuming. So, you know, I know this often reflects the messaging of regulators, and I know it's not necessarily how it's always received in the market, but that year isn't sort of an opportunity to pause. It's definitely an opportunity to take your time and do this in a more structured way, but wouldn't sort of take it as a chance to, you know, completely put a pause on your program. And if you've already started, then yeah, keep the momentum. Mapping your products against their HS codes, figuring out your position in the supply chain and your role or roles. I saw a question in the comments there about is it possible to have multiple of these roles, and that's definitely the case. Of course, depending on individual products, it's possible for a company to effectively do all of those roles, to be an operator, to be a downstream operator, to be a trader. So that is definitely possible. So it makes sense to really look on the basis of the different products you have and figure that out, and then start educating your suppliers, of course, as well, because I think one thing we see is there was a challenge of awareness and understanding of EUDR before, and as we get these additional changes, it of course creates more confusion. And so sharing that information so your suppliers understand what's going on is really, really essential. And then, of course, we as Live.io and TraderWare are still here to help. We help you solve for the end-to-end EUDR problem by automating the compliance work, helping you gather the information you need through your supply chain of plots and documentation that you'll still need as an operator, helping you integrate with your ERP system via our API and our connector, and then providing legally vetted information in the due diligence system with enterprise-grade security with our certifications and the highest accuracy deforestation analysis possible. And of course, we were very pleased that our work received the Red Dot Design Award last year as well. So just showing that we have been creating something that is really helping people, and they're finding it easy to use. Next slide, Andreas. And we still see this sort of 6-point flow. I mean, this will depend a lot on where you are in the supply chain and if you have different roles in the supply chain, but we still broadly see these 6 steps as being relevant. That you will need to gather data, you'll need to go off and gather plot data. Of course, now with this new setup, that may also be addresses, but for the majority of larger businesses, that will be plot data still, from your suppliers and your sub-suppliers. You'll still need to go off and gather legality data. So getting documents, asking questions for risk assessment from your suppliers. You'll still need to take that and assess risk, both deforestation risk and the legality risk of the data that's been shared by your suppliers. And then finally, you'll need to put that together in a way that you can prove the product compliance and send that through to the EU system. So matching that to the actual transactions, the shipments that you have coming through your business, and passing that all through to the EU system to traces. And of course, this are all things that you can do with TraderWare, both in our application and via our API. And we also give you a head start by coming into our system with our commercial network. So that's possible that when you join our platform, you can invite your suppliers to connect with you. And if they're already in our platform, then the data is already there. It's also something that when you go and talk to your suppliers, it makes it easier to say, if you have multiple companies that you're operating with that are on the TraderWare platform, then the data is already there for you to cooperate with each other. So it simplifies the process pretty significantly. And you can see we've got, as Andreas also mentioned before, and as is on this slide, we've got quite a lot of large companies that are on the platform that are currently sharing data that increases the chances that your suppliers will be part of the network.
Brilliant.
And that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it already with the update, and that also means we do have some time for questions, which I will take a look at now. So one you already answered, but one I think that I hear quite often is, how do we know which company is the first one placing the in-scope product on the EU market? Usually some information is not obtained due to competition issues and confidentiality. That's a good aspect of this also. I don't know, Chris, do you want to say something about this? Or
yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Unfortunately, there's probably that's again probably a bit of a gap in the way that the law's been written. There's really no way around that other than going off and having that conversation with your suppliers. I think I think that's one where hopefully your supplier, if they are an operator, should be fully aware of the obligations placed on them and the obligations that places on you. So it's really just going off and having that conversation, engaging with your suppliers, and also I think making clear that the data that you need is actually pretty limited and should hopefully not reveal anything commercially sensitive. You're not required to pass on the names of your supply chain. You're not required to pass on anything that might be sensitive like that. It's really limited to just what's required for compliance with the regulation here. So yeah, still requires a conversation for sure.
And it's since it's on a product level, it's also again a bit more complex. You cannot say this one of my suppliers is the operator. If you buy, it might be for some products, for some it might not. So I think communication is the only way around. Here's a bit of a special question, but since you are also from England, maybe you know, how does the operator apply if a product is manufactured in the EU, purchased by and transported to the UK, then the product is moved back into the EU for sale?
Yeah, it's a good question, and there are some parts of the regulation and the FAQs that deal with this situation of re-import. In that case, I think you would be retaining it would already have to be subject to due diligence to be exported from the EU market. And so in theory, you would be reusing the reference and verification numbers that allowed it to be exported from the market to bring it back into the market. So again, it would be retaining a lot of the same data to then reuse at that point of re-import.
That's also how I understand it, yeah. Okay, next question. If a company has two legal entities, one for import manufacturing and one for warehousing sales, would the import manufacturing be the operator and the operator, the warehousing sales be the trader, even though they are the same company?
Yeah, a lot of these things depend very much. It's sort of the regulation takes a pretty legalistic view on, and at least the way a lot of the FAQs are worded as well, takes a pretty legalistic view on ownership and transfers of ownership. So it's a little hard to say without knowing the exact legal structure there and the exact legal mechanism that occurs with the products. If the products transfer ownership between those two companies, then almost certainly. So if there's a transfer of ownership between the company that's importing and then the next company, even though they're part of the same group, then they'd be understood as being sort of two independent companies for those purposes. So something that's definitely worth looking at and understanding how those transfers happen. Generally, it isn't necessarily about possession versus a transfer and ownership, because as you see in the FAQs, it also deals with the concept of a freight forwarder as well, somebody who takes physical possession but never takes actual ownership. So a lot of it will come down to how those transfers of potential transfers of ownership are structured.
Then maybe one last question. I think this is probably from an NGO. I can't see the name. Our project participants, which is farmers in Kenya, want to determine if they are EUDR compliant. Basically, the question is, it looks like operators pay to do the work, to do the assessment, but the question is, can they also handle it themselves? And I think, I don't know if you want to, I can also say something about it.
Yeah, feel free, yeah.
So yeah, in the end, I mean, the requirements of it, I mean, the best advice, I think, for these suppliers, if they want to be compliant and to demonstrate these to their buyers, is to basically get the data ready and get the proof ready, basically the documentation that will be required by the operators. So in the end, they don't have to be compliant. The operator is the one who has to be compliant, but they will ask for this kind of the documentation and the plot data when buying from them. So I think getting the data ready is the answer here. All right, and with that, we are out of time. Thank you for, I see we have a few more questions. Apologies for not being able to answer them all, but thanks for joining. And as I said, we sent you the recording and the slides, and you're always welcome to reach out to us via the emails you see on the slide here, which I will also send to you. So with that, thank you and goodbye. Until next time.
Thanks so much. Thank you.